My name is Jane Franz, and I'm the Executive Director of Accorda Music Thanatology Institute. I've been a music thanatologist for over 20 years.
My name is Moya, and I have the great opportunity to be the program director for Accorda Music Thanatology Institute. It's unbelievable to me, but I've been in the field of music thanatology, including my training, for 30 years. And I've been able to work as a music thanatologist for all that time.
I got into it because my sister died of breast cancer at 38 years of age, and she had 3 small children. She was not ready to or accepting of her oncoming death. She fired doctors, nurses, caregivers, patients, other patient friends, families, if you wanted to talk about dying. It was horrible. She died a horrible death. I wished very much that there could have been something we could have done for her without talking about it. And then I found out about music thanatology, and I knew I had to explore that, and that's how I became a music thanatologist.
From a very young age, I loved singing, to the point where my family would say, "Okay, Laura, that's enough." In my younger years, I became a professional singer, and then got married, had 2 children, and stopped performing in bars and in theaters. So I was always drawn to music, and especially vocal music. And at some point, I had read a book about music thanatology, and I remember the time of day. I remember what I was wearing. I remember where my kids were. I remember the light in the room. I just remember so much, and going, that is it. That is what I want to do. This is how I can be within a musical field, and but yet it's not performance. And the way that destiny or fate, whatever you want to call it, leads you through, then I came to the school and became a music thanatologist.
Let's start with that word, shall we? Thanatology, because it isn't always a commonly known word. And I think it's good to say that thanatology comes from the Greek word thanatos, which means death. Thanatos was also the Greek god of death in mythology. So that's where the root lies. Thanatology is the art and study of dying and death. And then music thanatology comes in and brings music into that same realm, that same art and study of dying and death.
After introducing ourselves as music thanatologists, most people, after hearing the question, what is music thanatology? It brings us really closely to the whole aspect of death and dying. And for many people, that's a kind of a scary subject, and one that can be a conversation killer really quickly. But to be able to be in this clinical profession and to come face to face with our humanity and with the cycle of life, because we really believe that we know that death is a part of life and living. And to be able to be with people on that kind of basis is a real basic humanity. In that music thanatology, we strive to bring as much beauty and peace and presence and reverence into a room to whomever we meet and encounter. And so as a music thanatologist, I know it's a very particular profession. I know it's a profession that's not widely known, but I'm very glad to be a part of that tradition and hopefully legacy.
I think it's important to say that music thanatology is today considered a subspecialty of palliative care. And what we do as music thanatologists is we bring harp and voice, so harp music and vocal music, to the bedside of those who are living with terminal illness, those who are dying, their loved ones, their caregivers, in a very special manner. We call it a prescriptive delivery of music because we're basing it all on what we are observing from the patient and those present in what we call the vigil setting. And that's where we take our cues. We don't go in and play pre-ordered music. We don't work from a score. We are watching and responding musically. So that is what we do as music thanatologists. The term music thanatology was coined in the 70s by a woman by the name of Therese Schroeder-Schieker. The first school of music thanatology was up in Missoula, Montana. Another school of music thanatology was out of Eugene, Oregon, through a community college. And now we have the present iteration of a music thanatology training through Accorda Music Thanatology Institute,
which is a state licensed school of music thanatology. We're really proud of our licensure as a organized professional school.
Yes, Accorda is the only licensed private career school in existence today to train music thanatologists.
Music thanatologists work in hospitals, in hospices. They have private practices. So the locations of where music thanatologists serve their patients can be very different. For me, I am actually an employee of a hospital system with the Providence St. Joseph Health and Services Organization. And I'm a part of the Pastoral Services Department, which means that I am a part of the clinical team. I see people on all areas of the spectrum, from having a chronic illness, palliative care, to having patients referred to me when they have a terminal diagnosis, when they're hospice appropriate, and then as they're actively dying. So I see many people on the whole spectrum of that process, which is such a rich, and it's astounding to me how unique everyone's process is. Everyone's process in that dying, in their own dying way, is unique and special.
Mostly, music thanatologists work with people prior to their death, but it doesn't mean we don't see grief and that we don't actually respond to grief when it's present, because what we're seeing often is anticipatory grief in the patient, if they're awake and conscious, in the family, in the caregivers. It can be a lot of different things. So it's an interesting mix. We aren't just dealing with people who are grief-free. They are certainly experiencing this anticipatory grief.
I think for me, that is the biggest gift of being a music thanatologist, is in the connections that we can make. And so, yes, the situations are incredibly sad, really, really sad. But it's being able to be there for each other through the music. And,
we don't ever go into offer a vigil knowing what we will find. And it's not always easy, and it's not always pretty. And sometimes we would be very likely to think, oh, that didn't go well. And one of the things we train to is not thinking like that, because we don't know. And I'll give you an example. I walked into a room one day. There were several family members. The matriarch of the family was dying. She was fairly imminent, fairly close to death. And they greeted me, and I brought in the harp, and I said hello, and I sat down, and there was one man who was facing the window, standing at the window, looking out the window, and did not turn around. Everyone introduced themselves, and when someone asked him to introduce himself, he shot me and everyone else a look over his shoulder that was not pleasant and turned back to the window. So I went ahead. They wanted me to play, and I did for about half an hour and wrapped it up. Most of the people were very positive and loving and kind, and had appreciated the music and saw differences in their loved ones breathing, and felt relieved. The man never turned around from the window. And I left. I said goodbye, and I left, and I was out at the computer station right outside her hospital room, and I was charting in the electronic chart. And 2-3 minutes in, out comes that man. And he says, "I have to talk to you." And I said, "Okay." And he said, "I need to explain to you that it had nothing to do with you." He said, "I didn't want her to see me crying." And, it brings tears to my eyes even now. It was like, wow, could I have ever interpreted that in a million ways that weren't accurate? So we really try to not hold judgment before, during, or after the vigils that we offer, the music vigils, because we don't know. So we try to take our presence and use what we call phenomenological observation. That is, observing what is and responding to that, and leave our judgment at the door about what it means. So I think that's an important part of what we do.
Many people, when they see the harp and one, they may have the response of, "Oh, no, we don't like harp music," or do you know, we were asked the other day, "Do you know any Journey song?" That would sound really different on the harp. But, people have in their health and wellness, the idea that, that there's particular music that they would want to hear. But in our training as music thanatologists, we don't really go in with the idea of we're going to just play the patient's favorite music. And a lot of times that's the presumption of whomever we're playing for and of staff. But our music thanatologists, in their training, they study many different aspects of not only what they could possibly encounter in a visual setting. So what is our response, or what can we encounter of a patient on a physical basis, or on a pain basis, or how do we address pain, or how do we hold and support people with very different relationships with death and dying. We can see that quite a bit as well. So in our training, our students, the core of their training goes into learning about musical elements and then what a potential quality of a particular element could be. Like, for example, if we were to consider, say, 3/4 rhythm, which is a real common rhythm in a lullaby. I'm trying to think of a lullaby. I'm blanking out. So you establish this 3/4 rhythm. And a potential of that rhythm is that it sets up this sense of familiarity and maybe security, stability. So in observing, entering in a patient room, for example, if somebody's anxious, really, really anxious, maybe offering that quality of a 3/4 rhythm would be something that a music thanatologist would do. But it's also, like Jane was talking about, a prescriptive delivery. That 3/4 rhythm can be offered in many different ways. It can be offered on the harp with a lot of texture and complexity, or it can be offered quickly in a kind of a quicker tempo or a very slow tempo. So the music thanatologist is responding every moment with considered elements, potential qualities of music in a prescriptive or a live dynamic delivery.
And Simon, you were asking about, what it is that we determine, how it is that we determine what we'll do. And one of the things that we utilize are the vital signs. So we're watching the patient's respirations. We do touch patients. We take their pulse at the radial pulse. We might touch their face or hand to assess temperature. And we take a read on the emotional climate in the room by the patient, by whoever's present. And those are the things that inform us. And then based on that, we choose from what Laura's talking about with those musical elements. What might we use here? We have a patient with a terrible fever. Do we want to meet that with the cooling sound of, say, minor? Or do we want to meet it where it is with a bit more intense approach that is more of a warm or heating prescription? And no matter what we choose, we respond, and then we watch. And we watch to see then how the patient responds, and then we respond to that. So the music changes moment by moment based on what we observe of the patient and very often the family or caregivers. So that's how we do it. We don't play familiar music for the most part. Now, that's not to say that if somebody says to me, she needs to hear Amazing Grace, that I won't play Amazing Grace. I may start with a little Amazing Grace, and then I may just move away from that, but stay in the same rhythm or the same key or something of that nature once I've given that satisfaction, if that's what's needed. But by and large, we use fairly unfamiliar music because at the end of life, people are not about engaging. We aren't trying to engage their mentations. If I were to play row, row, row your boat gently down the stream, you're singing. I know that. Oh, the last time I heard that, you're singing along. That's not where people are by and large at the end of life. They're about unbinding and letting go. And so we're trying to provide an atmosphere in which they can process in whatever way they need to. And we have provided not only an atmosphere, but like a ground of being for them to do that in their own way. They're not thinking, they're not mentating, they're not doing that as much as they are just being bathed in the sound and then doing with it whatever they want.
It's hard to separate because the family is part of the unit with the patient. So in the scenario where if there's maybe a lot of activity and there's nobody really paying attention to the patient, where our focus is very much on the patient. So just by modeling our just being able to be attentive, to be very present with the patient, allowing the music maybe to continue, even though there might be a lot going on with the family. Conversely, if there is, say the patient's really fine and outwardly they're not showing a whole lot of, they're not showing any kind of distress or discomfort, and maybe the family is incredibly quiet and they're on opposite ends of the room, I may try to play something probably more in a warmer tonalities, is to include the family. And all of our prescriptive delivery is done through our best experience, through our reflection as music thanatologists. And then I would give out my best intention through the music of including that family within the music, maybe what I would do is offer some voice to include a quality of humanity and connection and warmth.
Yes.
So it really does vary, but it's really, and that's one reason why we continue to bring harps into room and offer this live presentation of music versus streaming or sitting outside of the doorway, is that we are able to really participate and respond through our observations in a moment-by-moment thing.
And often, if the family is uncomfortable, sometimes they will self-regulate. People may step out of the room for the time of the vigil for a few minutes, come back. Partway through the vigil offering, patient, if they're conscious and alert, may say, "That's enough for right now. Please come back tomorrow." Or, "Oh, I think I've had enough." All sorts of things happen, and we just respond lovingly, kindly, professionally to all that happens in the vigil.
The harp is one of those iconic instruments. So from antiquity, probably from the beginning of time, as instruments arose, so there was stringed instruments, drum, the reed instrument. So harps are really iconic. We are often compared to angels. Oh, there's the angels with our harps. So the harp is an incredible instrument in that it is able to offer so much, and it's portable. So a harp is like a vertical keyboard. So you have the treble or the higher notes that can carry a melody. And then you have more of the resonant, deeper, lower tones that can offer a support or harmony to the music. The tension of the strings is so gentle in that none of us ever develop calluses because of the length of the strings. And I really think, Simon, that it's that the softer, gentler resonance of the tone of the harp. So many times I hear, "Oh my goodness, that was so soothing. That was so soothing." So it's in the quality of the tone, the flexibility, and the options of what kind of texture you can receive from the harp.
And also, the harp, it's in the family with the piano and the guitar. They're all in the same family. But unlike those instruments, the harp's strings, they aren't up next to the sound body like on a guitar. They aren't encased in the sound body like a piano. And instead, they are free in the air. So the tones that come off the plucked strings can vibrate and resonate out in all directions. And they do that until they meet something that they can either resound off of or enter into. And it just so happens that the human body can conduct those vibrations right into the very bone, fluids, sinews of itself. So it's a very powerful instrument for people to be in the presence of. And I think that's why, as Laura is saying, we often hear from people, "Oh my word, that was so soothing. That's the first time I've felt any rest." That it really has a powerful expression in and of itself, and it affects people powerfully. We actually often talk about the music we offer in terms of light and dark, warm and cool, things of that nature. So it's all taken into consideration, even physically. When you walk into a room, I mean, it's going to have a particular light happening within it, or a particular darkness. Now, if it's too dark, we can't see to play, but that really does lend itself to how the vigil progresses, wouldn't you say, Laura?
Oh, absolutely. The other thing is that, you were mentioning, Jane, that people receive vibration. So we as human beings, we're vibrating entities as well. So the medium of music is being able to be offer a resonance. And we know that people are touched by that resonance without having lay any hands on anyone. So it's a form of touch.
Two things. I want to talk about what we do after the vigil setting and how we interact with the rest of the team. And then I also want to talk just a little bit about the school, if that's okay.
Yeah. I would love all of that. Go for it.
As far as what happens after the vigil setting, I'm going to start and then I'm going to let Laura take over. When we leave a room after having offered a music vigil, we chart, usually maybe in the electronic chart or maybe by hand, but in the patient's chart in most places. And the reason that we do that is because we are part of the interdisciplinary team. So our chart notes are read by physicians, nurses, social workers, chaplains on the team so that we can each stand on the shoulders of one another as we go into the room. We can read what the nurse had to say an hour before we got there. We can read what the doctor had to say the night before or what the chaplain had to say that morning. And that informs us before we go in. And then when we come out and we do our chart note, that informs them of what we encountered and how we met it. So it's a really important part of it. And I think, Laura, what else about that?
Yes, central to our practice as music thanatologists, and I think, Simon, a lot of it is because we are working with such a deeply, again, human event, as in dying, that we reflect on our experiences. And part of our training is for each of us to develop what we call a contemplative practice, so that we do observation and we have this experience, and then we take those experiences and we take time and reflect on what those experiences are, how the music was delivered, what kind of response, what kind of things did we learn from that experience, so that the next time that we go into a patient's room, we are taking that learning in for the benefit of the next patient and the next family. So it's very important for us to establish a practice of doing just that, of being reflective, call it being contemplative. We consider ourselves contemplative professionals.
Most often in hospital settings, some hospice settings, and some private practices, the music thanatologist is not only considered part of the interdisciplinary team, but we sit in the interdisciplinary meetings. So you may be in a hospital setting and sit in on one of those every morning, 2-3 times a week, whatever it is, and you have an input. They sometimes turn to you and say, what do you think? Do you think we should send the music thanatologist in for this person? Or the music thanatologist might say, you know, I think this could be a very good place to bring in music thanatology. What do you think? And here's why. And what do you think? And then you have all these people right there. And we're all sharing and we're all working together. It is a really marvelous part of our profession, I think.
We are a clinical practice. We the training again of the students is in organ and body systems, so they have an understanding of the internal workings of the body, so that they can read the body. We also have quite a bit of training in our own personal development, in again, how different cultures look at death and dying. So we're really wanting to attend not only to physical needs, amelioration of pain or anxiety or agitation, but also to be able to address what's coming up emotionally. And that's in the dying process. Wow, it can be really, really challenging, not only for their patient, but the patient family as well, their loved ones. And then we say spiritually too, Simon, and spiritually is much, it includes what kind of faith tradition or religious tradition a patient or their family might have. But it really is about meaning making, about helping people make meaning out of this incredible part of life, which is dying.
We train and educate people who want to do this, who want to become music thanatologists and help transform end of life and palliative care in the world. So people who are drawn, who are called to this work, are mostly the people we find at our doorstep. What we offer is a 23-month non-degree training program. We meet on every weekend except August and December for 23 months. We have 7 live didactic weekends, that's what we call them, and they're all day Saturday and all day Sunday. And then we have 12 that are online, just like this. We do it on Zoom. So they attend those, they attend harp and voice lessons every week. They do all their assignments, they take their exams, they study what we call our thematic music material. They study that, they have to pass music reviews in that. But I think that the keystone and the gemstone of our training is our clinical internships. So once the students are ready, they enter into a clinical internship at a hospital, a hospice, or a private practice that may go to several hospitals and hospices. And they work alongside a certified music thanatologist for the whole time. It can be up to 18 months. They usually go in once or twice a week. They can go in from anywhere from 4 to 5 hours, and they work alongside them slowly until they can go into the vigil. First they observe, then they start to offer music, maybe just on the harp, maybe a little vocal, and pretty soon they're able to work with the certified music thanatologist and share the vigil. And eventually, of course, they can go into the room by themselves and give a vigil. And that's a long process and takes a lot of time and experience. So that's what we are doing for students. And as I said, it's a 23-month program. I'll let you know that we're in process right now. The students in our current cohort are getting near the end of the first year. And so it's an exciting time. They're in their clinical internships. They're doing all the work. They're sending everything in. I might mention that it's a pretty intensive program. It's very rigorous. It can average 20 hours of your time per week, including everything, just to do this. So it does take a person who is called to it and really is willing to put in the time and effort for it.
We have what we call 6 learning streams. And we talked a little bit about what those are, but the learning streams that we have are called, one is the conscious body in health and illness. So that's going to be really focused in on the physical body and beyond. Let's see, we have contemplative musicianship. We have a personal development stream. We have professional studies, how a person would grow within the profession of music thanatology, and thanatological studies, history of death and dying, and again, how other cultures see death and dying. And it's all culminated within clinical studies of integration at the bedside with a certified music thanatologist.
And throughout it is the stream of contemplative musicianship. So that's kind of it in a big picture. And then each of those break down into modules, and then each session that the students are part of.